Hey folks, it's the Poor Sports Seattle podcast. This is Casey McLean, and we're back. Missed a week, Memorial Day. I decided to spend some time with my family. I think I was thinking about recording a show on the Sunday or over the weekend, and decided not to do that. And then I thought about doing it on Monday, and then I thought about doing it on Tuesday, and I was a little bit under the weather on Tuesday, and I've just been exhausted. I've been burning it at both ends, so I decided to take the whole week off, and it didn't seem like a big deal. And then some controversy brewed over that I didn't get a chance to talk about, and now it's all kind of figured out. But we'll talk about it in a little bit. That'll be the Rowland-Smith Marc James controversy. I'll weigh in on that briefly. Also, I had put together a list of Mariners trade targets. We're going to talk a little bit about that. I got to go to a Rainiers game and watch the final days of Cole Young in Tacoma, which was pretty exciting. Also saw Harry Ford, and I want to talk about that. Saw a very high scoring game, which, if you know the Rainiers schedule at all, if you follow them at all, will give you an idea of which game I went to. And yeah, I want to talk also about some other Mariner stuff. Cal Raleigh is hitting out of his mind. Randy Johnson and Ichiro are going to both have the number 21 or 51 retired a year apart from each other with the Mariners, which is interesting. But let's start with the Ryan Rowland-Smith controversy. After, by the way, I'm going to tell you I do a very bad job of plugging stand-up comedy dates. Let's see, the biggest one. And by biggest one, I mean it is a door deal, is on June 13th. I will be at Evergreen State Brewing. I would love it if you bought tickets for that early if you live in Gig Harbor, because the nicest thing you can do for any comedian, outside of like going on their Patreon, which I don't even have a Patreon, but like outside of doing something like that, is to buy tickets to their shows early. Because good goddamn, is it stressful? I've done a couple door deals recently, and one of them I think I cleared. No, well, it's an embarrassing amount of money. The other one I made a little more money. The first one I made less money than my opener made on the show. So it's the nature of taking the risk of doing door deals. But here we are. I got to go to Ellensburg a couple nights ago, and then last night, like I said, burning the candle at both ends. I went to sleep at like 7 p.m. And slept until almost 6 a.m. That's the longest I've slept in quite a while. 2 kids, multiple irons in the fire career-wise. It gets you there. And so I've been exhausted. I played Chambers Bay Golf Course on Friday. I had to stop, not because of exhaustion, but I had to stop after 15 holes to just to appease my wife. She had some plans that I needed to be home for the kids for, which, by the way, that's an expensive round of golf to end early. But it's the most, that course and that round, because I've played Chambers Bay twice, that course is the most expensive place I've ever golfed. That round was the first time I've ever played Chambers Bay not in the winter and not on a member rate. So but yeah, I was physically, emotionally, mentally exhausted. And by the way, really cool. I met my wife in college, and then I have a joke about this, but I dropped out and she transferred, and she went to Central Washington University and in Ellensburg, and it's like was very cool to go back out there and see how everything has changed. So June 13th to Evergreen State Brewing. I'll also be at Tacoma Comedy Club 6th and Proctor, opening for Joe List on June 12th. And I will be out there headlining June 22nd, which is not officially a door deal, but there's like a bonus structure, I believe. Come on out to that, please, because boy do I hate performing for small crowds. Okay. Let's talk about this, the Ryan Rowland-Smith, Marc James situation, because Marc James is a sports radio host who I was not familiar with. I've started to listen to, I'm on my second iteration of this for sure. I've started to listen to the, 710 or what, not 710, what's it called now? Seattle Sports, that's on 97.3. The Seattle Sports used to be the ESPN affiliate station. I think it still is, but they just call it Seattle Sports. With my kids in the car, I trust the FCC to hold down the language and the topics and all that stuff. So I'm not corrupting my children with comedy podcasts or dirtier sports podcasts. And I've started to listen to Seattle Sports Radio a little bit more. The last time I did this, my oldest daughter was turning like 2, and I was listening a lot when Danny O'Neill was on the morning show. Love Danny O'Neill. Probably going to be a future guest of this podcast. We actually I talked to him about doing it, and then I just never followed up with him. So Danny, I know you're not out there listening, but I'll be messaging you. Don't you worry. They replaced Jason Puckett. This is my understanding. Don't know the schedule perfectly. Don't know the history perfectly. Jason Puckett was part of a long holdout. Didn't do radio for a couple months as he was like, I think, outside of his contract. And then he finally agreed to a contract. And then they decided, as part of him agreeing to a contract, they were going to fire his co-host. So he went back on it. By the way, I will say I didn't listen to Jason Puckett on sports radio, I think, for much of his career, maybe any of his career. That's the most fucking punk rock thing you could do. That's the coolest, most loyal thing you could do, in my opinion. Really awesome. I've listened now to his podcast, his daily podcast, more than I ever listened to his radio show. Not just because of that, it's very good, but also like, what a cool gesture. It's so rare that you see people have real principles. And so he gets replaced by this dude, Marc James, who I think is just like a mercenary. They've had a couple of these guys over there, and it's got to be tough. I mean, they have, there's been some pretty good local sports radio guys that are just lifelong Seattle sports fans. When I was growing up, and this is, by the way, these guys could all be controversial pieces of shit at this point. I haven't listened to, like I said, I listened to Brock and Salk because it's the one I know. It's the devil I know, and they are what they are. These other guys could have become controversial in some way. I used to listen to Mitch in the Morning when I was a kid. He's obviously no longer on the air. He has a podcast, but again, it's a podcast. Cannot necessarily trust to be appropriate for my children. And so I didn't listen to Jason Puckett very much. Didn't listen to I haven't listened to much in a long time. This Marc James guy comes along. He's a mercenary from out of town. He's been around apparently for a couple months and decides to, he has a local Mariners blogger named Luke Arkins on his radio show, and makes a couple huge mistakes. One of them is he voices an opinion of a local announcer, Ryan Rowland-Smith, who's, admittedly very Australian, and talks about how his accent is jarring in the broadcast booth and how he can't stand it, and it's the elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about. And I had audio downloaded. I'm not going to try to find it right now. We're already so far past this that we don't need to make a big production out of this. And then it became a controversy. Luke Arkins admonished him for the thing that he said about that. And then he said Luke Arkins was the worst guest he's ever had. He'll never be welcome back on those airways or otherwise. By the way, a bunch of other hosts on those airways came out and said Luke Arkins is welcome on their show. Marc James eventually apologizes. I don't know where we stand as far as, I'm sure that's probably soiled the relationship between Marc James and Ryan Rowland-Smith. Being a guy who is, it is interesting to me for a guy who's a hired gun, a mercenary, to come to town and just not be, first off, I don't think that it is broadcasting. So having a super thick, difficult to understand accent could be challenging. So I get that. But to be well, this guy's Australian. He should be calling Australian rules football. He can't be an announcer here because he's from Australia. That's obviously, like, especially in Seattle, you're never getting away with that. You're never squeezing past that one. But I could say, like, first off, I miss Dave Sims like crazy. I think Dave Sims was one of the greatest announcers the Mariners have ever had, and it's in a pantheon of very good announcers. I thought he was great. He was, in his own way, accidentally controversial. I never thought he should have been. Thought he was a very good announcer that made occasional mistakes, like every announcer does. He goes to the Yankees. The Mariners shake up the entire broadcast booth. Bill Kruger's gone. Mike Blowers is gone. I didn't realize this until a couple of years ago. Dave Valley does like part-time with the Texas Rangers and part-time with the Mariners. Angie Mentink steps in, who's been on the broadcast team for a very long time, but not in the live broadcast booth. She's been in the studio for, 2 decades, maybe longer than 2 decades. And Ryan Rowland-Smith, who's been also working in that capacity, steps in. And I'll tell you, the first couple times, it's given me an appreciation for Aaron Goldsmith because he is, like, pretty clearly the best and most polished announcer on the TV broadcast. No shade on Rick Riz, who's also obviously very accomplished and very talented and very polished. But these are like just new announcers. Not only new in terms of like, they're like, I think Angie Mentink does a very good job, and I think Ryan Rowland-Smith does a very good job. What I'll say is, it is like, I'm almost 40 years old. It is jarring to turn on a baseball game and hear a thick Australian accent. Now, he gives great analysis. You can get over the I'm not like stewing on his accent. This idea that it was the elephant in the room. But I do remember the first time going like, this is just not what baseball has sounded like my whole life. That's fine. You're allowed to notice those things. It was not the elephant in the room for anyone else, I don't think. People could not like Ryan Rowland-Smith. I like Dave Sims. A lot of people really hated Dave Sims as an announcer. The idea that like your country of origin means you can never be an English language announcer, I think is obviously not what Marc James meant, but is what he said basically. And that's stupid. It's stupid and wrong. And then the apology was like very obviously forced by pressure from people saying radio is in trouble. I studied radio in college almost 20 years ago, and it's been in trouble since before then. Radio is struggling. So, like, to do something that alienates a whole bunch of fans who want to rally around a guy who broadcasts games that do not appear on your station, by the way. It would be one thing if it was the people, if he said it and he worked for the station that broadcast the games, and there could be some sort of like mediation between the two guys. But in this case, it's like, okay, so what? The Mariners just could stop sending their players over there because you're denigrating a member of their broadcast team for no reason, a guy that should be a colleague, a peer of yours. Unnecessary, unforced error. Whatever. This dude also has some controversy that predates him coming to Seattle. I don't factor that in at all. I was going to say I could not care less. It's not that I couldn't care less. I don't listen to his show. I'm not doing anything to support this guy. All I'm saying is just on this issue alone, huge mistake and just an inelegant way of saying something that I do think has some truth to it, which is especially if you didn't grow up a Mariners fan, which I did. So I remember Ryan Rowland-Smith playing. I remember that. I believe this is true and this could be wrong, but I believe the reason he got the name The Hyphen is because I think he was the first player with a hyphenated last name on the back of his jersey. I think that's true. And then we've obviously seen some since then, and I don't know if that was a Major League Baseball policy or just some tradition that had lasted forever or whatever. I don't remember what the story is, if Mr. and or Mrs. Rowland and Mr. and or Mrs. Smith had some sort of contentious divorce, if his parents had already hyphenated their names. I have no idea. It's a very modern problem. It's not even problem. It's a very modern occurrence. Modern meaning like in the last 40 years. Hyphenated names have been around for a long time, obviously, and have become more common and then somehow less common and whatever. I'm aware of Ryan Rowland-Smith, so it's not to me like a random Australian guy got thrown into the broadcast booth and nobody. I will say I've been watching, I started watching the Warehouse Games just for the Blitzball, which, by the way, I want to start a comedians Blitzball league so bad, but they have a Blitzball tournament called the Blitzball Battle, which is a John Boy Media thing. A bunch of dudes play against each other. There's a guy, a bunch of John Boy Media people, that is. There's a guy that works for them that does the announcing alongside Chris Rose named Peter Moylan. He's Australian, and I feel the same way. You go like, Blitzball isn't a sport that has some like historically American voice to it. And I watch it and I'm like, yeah, this guy's noticeably Australian. And it is for a minute, you're like, okay, this is different than I've heard. And then you move on and then it's fine. That's by the way, I mean, the future. I even think another thing, the future of sports play-by-play, I really do believe we should have like this format I'm on right now. I'm on this program called StreamYard. Let me call games to the 4 people that give a shit. Like, give me a feed that's got no play-by-play on it and let me call games. I think you could probably do that, right? I'm not going to, but I think you could probably. I can't show you the video. That's the problem. But like, baseball is already divided into multiple camps of people, like analytics people and traditional fans and casual fans. And I think there's probably a broadcast. It's so cheap to broadcast now. Let's get a couple broadcasts going. Why not? What do you need? 2 mics? Get a couple broadcasts going. Get 2 Seattle comedians on the internet with no FCC regulations. So I went to the Rainiers game with my oldest daughter. She is 5 years old, almost 6. And I went to the game they played on Wednesday against the Salt Lake City Bees, the Angels affiliate. I believe that the Rainiers won 20-8. Let's pull that up real quick. Rainiers schedule. The Rainiers do a really cool thing. There's 2 cool things they do on Wednesdays. It is craft beer Wednesdays when they have a home game. So there's a $6 craft beers available right behind home plate. I did not like the craft beer, but they also had a $6 Mexican lager. So I had, let's just say, a perfectly responsible amount of those. But a hot game in the stands, $6 beers, they were going down fast. Oh, they won 19-8. Sorry, I thought it was 20-8. But my daughter, I am just trying to get her to care about baseball. It's since she's been born, we switched from Comcast before she was born. The Mariners have not been good. I have not made it a priority to make sure I could see a bunch of Mariners games. So I've been doing the MLB TV, VPN, BS for quite a while. Now we finally have our Root Sports streaming service. That's very exciting, by the way. I love the Root Sports streaming service. I have minor complaints about the interface, but other than that, as a product, it's incredible. I love it. So I'm trying to, she's seeing more baseball. We're hitting balls in the yard. I'm trying to get her into baseball, and we go to the Rainiers because I want to give her an experience where she can. It's not 40,000 people in a stadium. It's not super loud, and I want her to experience baseball where we can talk. She can ask me what's happening, and we can talk about it. It's very fun. Great game to go to, by the way. 19 runs. We left. Here's what I'll tell you. The games on Wednesdays start at 6:05. Perfect. We live close enough to the stadium. That's perfect. That means we have a good chance of seeing 2 hours of baseball and still getting her to bed somewhere around bedtime. I'm trying to pack good stuff alongside baseball. Give her positive positive connections with baseball. We're going to get a piece of pizza in the stadium, and we're going to get some candy, and we're going to get ice cream after. We're going to do fun stuff. We're going to make baseball very fun. And then she gets this game where they score 19 runs. We left shortly after the 5th inning. I think it was 17-6 at the time. First home run, by the way, the fireworks go off at Cheney Stadium, and she's like, "Ooh, I don't like that. That's a part." And I'm like, "Well, you're not gonna like a Mariners game then." She's not yet been to a Mariners game. We've been to a couple Rainiers games. We went to the Sue Birds last game, but she doesn't like super loud crowds. We got to get her some. We have those little earmuff deals that quiet the crowd down for her. Anyways, I got to see Cole Young and Harry Ford. And then other guys that are slightly less exciting, Tyler Locklear, etc. But I got to see Cole Young and Harry Ford. Cole Young in one of his last games as a Mariner, he goes 5 for 6. I don't believe he hit a home run. Yeah, he hit a double. He hit 2 doubles in the game, 1 double that I remember very well. And then Harry Ford hit a home run that I was there for. That was like towards the end of me being there. And then a couple days later, I mean, these guys have been playing very well at Tacoma, and a couple days later, Young gets called up. And it's not that hard to call him up. In fact, I didn't even see the corresponding move. Let's see. Has Donovan Solano still on the active roster against all odds, it feels like. It wasn't it was Legumina that went down, right? It seems like eventually, what are we doing with Solano at this point? What's the point of keeping a 37-year-old? I know he's making money, but like the dude is producing absolutely nothing, and is not really. I'm going to pull up his defensive numbers real quick to let myself eat a little bit of crow if possible. I mean, you're talking a guy with a 20 WRC plus, I believe, by the way, crawling out of the negatives on WRC plus, who is, the 5'10" first baseman has been very well documented, or maybe even smaller first baseman. He's played 177 innings there, and 2 innings at third base. This, by the way, 2 innings at third base on a team that was hoping Jorge Polanco would play third base, and he has not. So this is not altogether surprising that they were looking for another option. There's been Dylan Moore has spent some time at second. What is his name? Miles Mastroboni has spent some time at second. These are not long-term options. Although I do think Dylan Moore, I think that having a regular second baseman and letting Dylan Moore float around is the best way to maximize his value. And I still stand by the way, the other day we talked about it a couple weeks ago. I think the Mariners should look into extending Dylan Moore. But that being said, Cole Young, I don't know how much more you're expecting him to learn at the AAA level. He's playing pretty well there. It doesn't mean that he's going to come up and start crushing right away, but he's playing pretty well at that level. He was at AAA, 245 plate appearances, not the smallest sample size in the world, 12.7% walk rate, 11.4% strikeout rate. These are the things that you look for a guy being ready to make the jump. His strikeout rate will probably go up as a pro. His walk rate will probably go down, especially because he's not a guy that's going to hit for so much power. But, it makes a ton of sense. He's also 21 years old. He's not 19 years old like Colt Emerson. I think it was the right time to call up Cole Young. And I think also, by the way, if he doesn't perform, it's fine to send him back down. There's a lot of pressure put on this exact decision. And I think it's to me, I think it gets overwrought in people's hands quite a bit. Easy decision to call up Cole Young. Cole Young's doing well, but the natural next question is, what do you do with the next prospects? And the guy who would probably be, I think for most organizations, he'd probably be up by now. There's a chance that Harry Ford would be a starter on 15 or more Major League Baseball teams right now. but the Mariners happen to have Cal Raleigh, who might be the best catcher in the 2020s. Like, the guy is absolutely crushing. By the way, he has like a 330-something WRC plus in his last 6 games. 6 home runs in his last 6 games, absolutely just destroying the ball. The Mariners are doing everything they can to give up the contributions of Cal Raleigh to lose in games where he has monster games. But you got this guy blocking Harry Ford, Cal Raleigh. And now, were Cal Raleigh to get injured, and I'll say this, like, it's not unreal. Cal Raleigh a couple of years ago tore a labrum in his thumb. He plays the most physically demanding position, maybe for sure, or outside of pitching in baseball, the most injury prone outside of pitching in baseball. I don't think having a backup catcher ready to take his spot and play significant innings is a bad thing, is a useless, unvaluable thing. But also, if Harry Ford isn't going to get significant playing time in the pros, you don't really want to call him up and have him sit behind. And I don't think that his bat plays particularly well at first base, DH. He's attempted to play some corner outfield. I don't know that his bat plays particularly well. If he's a league average fielder in the outfield, which he probably would not be this season, he'd probably be significantly below league average. Now, does that make him worse than Randy Arozarena in the field? I don't know. Randy Arozarena is a significantly below average left fielder, but Harry Ford has no spot on this roster, has no spot on this active roster right now, really. He's your like backup DH, backup catcher, backup first baseman. What does that get him? 2 or 3 games a week? 10 or 15 plate appearances a week? That's not what you need. One thing that I do think would be interesting is, and I've advocated for this since I think last season, I thought the way that the Mariners treated Cal Raleigh, playing him all those games at catcher, I mean, like 150-something games at catcher last year, I believe. To me, it seemed like they were preparing to not extend Cal Raleigh. And what I do believe is that to preserve Cal Raleigh's bat, which is very good, Cal Raleigh is an elite hitter right now. And to preserve that, I do think there's probably value in getting him some time at first base, getting him some time at DH. And I know they've DH'd him a fair amount, but I'm talking like I would like to see Cal Raleigh catching. So he's got 188 WRC plus right now. I guess last year he was only at 117, but that's mostly because of a low average. His strikeouts are a little bit lower this year. But he's not BABIP he's just hitting the ball out of the ballpark is really what's happening. That's what's really happened is all these balls have started to leave the ballpark. I'm going to pull up after the podcast, I'll pull up his StatCast stuff, but what has he got? He's got 40. So he's got like 13 games at DH, I believe, this year. That's actually, I don't mind that at all. What did he do at catcher last year? He played in 135 games. He played in 135 games at catcher last year, started 125 games. That's not as bad as I actually thought, but still, I'd like to see that even shrunk. So I could see a world where Harry Ford or a quality backup catcher plays 60 games at catcher and then finds some other place to play. And if they could make Harry Ford that guy, if you could make him a guy that's able to play left field, able to play right field, able to play first base, and hit at a high rate, and play 60 games at catcher, I think that's great. But I'm going to tell you the absolute honest truth, I don't think the bat's going to play. I don't think there's enough power in Harry Ford's bat to move off of catcher and be a good major leaguer. I think he could be an average-ish major leaguer. I think he could be a below-average first baseman. I think he could be. It's possible that he's got enough speed and enough talent and enough instinct to play outfield, but he's not playing outfield at AAA right now. He hasn't played outfield since last year. He only played 8 games last year. The coaching staff knows better than I do whether or not he should or should not be playing the outfield. So my assumption is that they think Harry Ford, because they're only playing him at catcher and DH, they view him as a catcher/DH. And that spot's filled on this roster. I also think that one thing I will say is when Luke Raley comes back, I think the best roster construction you could hope for is that Raley moves to left field or right field, whatever, and Randy Arozarena becomes your regular DH. But that's going to require Jorge Polanco being healthy and effective and playing third base, which are we still, I've been a little bit road weary, but have we still not seen a Jorge Polanco third base appearance since what do we see? We got 5 appearances at third base. Are they recent? It's possible these are recent, and I could be an unnecessary alarmist, but let's see. 2025 fielding. I thought they were early. So, yeah, I mean, he hasn't played the field. Jorge Polanco hasn't played the field since May 6th. Played the 3rd, 5th, and the 6th. And, I mean, it's just, you got to get Jorge Polanco back out in the field if this roster has a problem if Jorge Polanco is your DH. And that could solve a lot of issues. And so there's 2 options with Harry Ford, I think, which is to call him up, figure out spots to play him. I think that's valiant and is noble, and it's potentially useful. There's probably a decent argument that Harry Ford is a better first baseman or is a more valuable person on this roster than Rowdy Tellez, than Donovan Solano. I could go down that road and be totally comfortable with that idea. But you got to figure out the Jorge Polanco situation. The other option, of course, and I've said this since last year, is to have Harry Ford be the one of those prospects that you're willing to trade, because he's blocked, because he's blocked. He's moved up the minors fast. That position is very scarce in Major League Baseball, so he would be very valuable, I think, in trade. And you got to wonder, even if you go through the process of converting him to another position, you have to expect that's going to be a somewhat painful process. To go through all that process for a guy that's going to be a league average-ish or worse player that could have been something that turned into something more valuable, that's not really palatable to me. The other option, of course, is to trade him, like I said, and I have an interesting trade idea. I don't know that it's going to be... I can tell you why I don't think that it's the best trade idea. So, the Red Sox signed Alex Bregman in the offseason. I think 3 years, $120 million. Bregman has an opt-out after 2025. And before even talking about the rest of this, I suspect that if he gets traded to the Mariners, Alex Bregman would opt out after 2025. Because I think his plan, signing only a 3-year deal for modest money, was to try to set up a platform year for a bigger payday. But one thing about Alex Bregman that's interesting is he's got $20 million annually of deferred money. And the way that deferred money works, as I understand it, is that the team that signs him to that contract is on the hook for that deferred money even after they trade him. Now, the exception to this might be if there are player options, but I believe that's true. I believe that the Red Sox are responsible for $60 million of his salary if he is traded and plays the rest of his time with another team. And if you could get Alex Bregman for 3 years, $60 million, or 2.5 years in the prorated amount of the first year and $20 million the following years. Not to say the Mariners aren't cheap enough to find that unpalatable, but like that sounds great to me. Would you do Harry Ford straight up for Alex Bregman? He has no trade clause. That's also kind of unique. Alex Bregman contract. Let's see. 3 years. This is what Google's AI says. 3 years, $120 million, $5 million signing bonus, which would have been paid by them, $120 million guaranteed, significant deferred payments. The final payment is due in 2046. Opt-outs after the 2025 and 2026 season. So Bregman would have to assume that would have to think he's going to get more than $40 million a year. And I just think, like, he's going to come to Seattle and his numbers are going to be suppressed and he's not going to want to do. But that's like the dream scenario, right? I don't know if there's a way you could get him in here and then sign him to a deal that's like, give him an extra $20 million to not exercise those player options. I don't know what the answer is. I was looking at other trade targets potentially. Bregman is the only guy that I think makes any, and also, by the way, the Red Sox are like, the challenge with talking about trades right now, this early in the season, and in the 10-team playoff era, where more teams are competing for playoff spots, is there's not that many teams that are realistically looking to trade guys, and the teams that are, the guys that they have that are valuable are usually pretty young and pretty cheap, and not really who you would expect them to be. Like, it's not an easy A to B obvious trade target. Even so the White Sox are really bad. Luis Robert is perpetually the subject of trade talks. 1, Robert is not playing great. 2, he doesn't make that much money. There's not a huge financial motivation for the White Sox to move on from Luis Robert. Also, by the way, that puts them, I think, even further under I think they can't collect competitive balance tax because of how little they're spending. So, like, who are the teams? I'm going to take a look real quick. I'll tell you that's the thing to me. Is like, you could say the Mariners should make a trade. Who are the teams? Who are the players? These are the teams with sub 30% playoff odds according to Fangraphs. And one honorable mention is the Rays are at 33%. I guess another honorable mention is the Royals are at 37.5%. And we have another, almost 2 months before this decision has to be made. So some of these teams will probably drop out of playoff contention between now and then also. The Angels, an in-division team. The Rangers, an in-division team. The Athletics, an in-division team. Now, could you potentially, like, the Athletics are a little bit different because they have this stadium situation. They're playing in Sacramento. They're not really going to alienate their home fans if they make a trade with an intra-divisional opponent. I don't know if the A's are as sensitive to that, but if we assume like old school rules, it's hard to trade with an intra-divisional opponent. That is, let's take that out. The White Sox have Luis Robert, nobody else to prop up their offense as like a realistic trade target, I think. The Red Sox are interesting. 17% chance making the playoffs. Alex Bregman is the guy that makes the most sense. By the way, I'd be interested in talking about Rafael Devers, but that contract is huge. That's this would be like a Robinson Cano to the Mets kind of deal where they'd have to pay like half the contract. I don't think the Mariners are going to give up significant prospects and trade for Rafael Devers. And I don't know if you want Rafael Devers for 10 more years or whatever it is. The Orioles, 2% playoff odds. We'll get back to the Orioles because I think the Orioles have the most players that might make sense for the Mariners. And then if you go to the National League, the Nationals, 1.8% chance to make the playoffs. The Marlins, 0.1%. The Brewers, pretty low. Actually, I think the Brewers are new entrants to this since I started looking at it. The Reds and the Pirates, And then the Diamondbacks are at 28%. They were a little over 30% as of yesterday. Really tough division, but they're not so far out. They're 8 games out of the division, which I think probably puts them 8 games out of the wild card. Is that right? I think so. Well, maybe not even. They're probably more than 8 games out because the Phillies are, I think, leading the wild card. So maybe, I mean, I think you'll see a couple of these teams kind of start to move in the direction that they're going to end up as time goes on. But let's start with this. Rockies, they're 9-50, by the way. 0% chance, according to Fangraphs, making the playoffs. Pretty obvious. They're projected to lose 113 games. Pathetic team right now. The guys that they have on the roster that would make sense for them to want to trade are all playing terrible. You don't want Chris Bryant unless it's a free reclamation project that you don't have to commit any money to. That's a non-starter. The Diamondbacks have some guys. I'm gonna, because I think that Dan Viens just started a podcast called Mariners Forever. He brought the idea of Eugenio Suarez to my attention. I'm not going to steal his thunder on that. Go check out. I don't know if they've put the episode out yet or not, but go check out Mariners Forever because I think Eugenio Suarez would be interesting. And then you start to get into the teams that are like 50% chance to make the playoffs. I'm going to tell you, these are the players that I think make the most sense for the Mariners and that the teams may be interested in trading those players. Luis Robert, we can talk about him right away. First off, he's in his second straight year with a sub 100 WRC plus. Plays center field, plays a decent center field, probably slots into left field in Seattle really easily. Probably a huge defensive upgrade over Randy Arozarena. If the bat's there, fine, but it hasn't been there for 2 straight years. He's injury prone. He is only 27 years old. He is only making an annual average value of $8.33 million. He's controllable until 2028. So these are things that are good about him. Are you giving up Harry Ford for a guy who's at a 59 WRC plus this year, who was at, I think, like an 84 WRC plus last year? This is his last 600 plus plate appearances are in the 70s WRC plus. That's not a guy you're giving up one of your top prospects for, in my opinion. So 2 other guys. Andrew Haney is a starting pitcher for the Pittsburgh Pirates. He's 34 years old, $5.25 million prorated salary. I'm going to pull up his numbers. He's a guy that I've kind of always had my eye on since he pitched for the Angels many years ago. So he was a 2-win pitcher last year in Texas, and then he's kind of been, a little bit. He's like a swing starter and reliever guy. Interesting guy. Doesn't make a lot of money. Another guy of that type, because I do think the Mariners could use depth and guys that could bounce between pitching or starting pitching and relief pitching. Another guy like that plays for Baltimore. So we've talked about Luis Robert. We've talked about Andrew Haney. I don't think there's great options on any of the other teams that are sub 30% outside of the Diamondbacks. Might have some guys, and we could talk about those guys next week. I'm going to give my buddy Dan Viens exclusivity on that this week. By the way, I think I'm going to be on his podcast later this week, so check that out. But I think it's going to be, he has a cool idea, and if we do it, it'll be on both his Seahawks Forever podcast and the Mariners Forever podcast, which that's a pretty unique idea to get on both those things. So I think the Mariners could use extra depth in their bullpen, especially high leverage guys, and they also could use another starting pitcher. So the Orioles have Charlie Morton, and Charlie Morton has been one of these like spin rate darlings. He was in Tampa Bay, he was in Houston, and a guy that has not lost a ton of velocity. He has not been incredibly effective this year, but he has not lost a ton of velocity. I'm going to pull up Charlie Morton real quick just to illustrate my point. Charlie Morton, according to Fangraphs, his Average fastball velocity this year, 94.1. This is at age 41 years old. He was 94.3 last year, 95 the year before that, 94.9, 95.5, 93.7, 94.8. Like, he's in the range of his career averages. He just has not been particularly effective this year. He's had a 6.2 ERA, 4.66 expected ERA, 5.24 FIP, 4.42 expected FIP, xFIP, but a guy who has given up 16% of his fly balls have been home runs. I don't think that would be the case in T-Mobile Park. I think that guy's stuff plays in T-Mobile Park. And a guy that can come in and eat innings, that can be a swing guy that's right now pitching out of the Baltimore bullpen, but that has been a starter for most of his career, started 30 games each of the last 2 years, started 8 games to start this season, and he's had struggles. But his walk rate's up, by the way, this year. And the last 3 years, it's up from earlier, like very successful years. But I think a guy that would be an interesting reclamation project, a guy who's in his 40s, who he's pitched in the postseason a bit, an interesting guy. But the guys that I think make even more sense from... one other guy from Charlie Morton, by the way, makes $15 million a year. He'll be a free agent after this year. Brian Baker is a reliever for the Orioles, 30 years old, about to hit. He seems like a guy the Mariners would have molded out of garbage they found on a garbage heap, frankly. He throws 97 miles an hour. He's 30 years old. He was in the Toronto organization. He's kind of been up and down with Baltimore. He's got a 2.77 ERA, striking out 11 batters per 9 innings. This is stuff. This is high leverage reliever stuff. Probably fastball slider guys, my guess. Perfect. 51% fastballs, 28% sliders, 20% changeups. The prototype of a high leverage reliever that is probably streaky. Slider is the pitch with heavy platoon splits, and so then those are the two guys he'll be after this year, he'll be in his first arbitration year. There's two guys that the Orioles have on the roster that I think could improve the Mariners offense without sacrificing defense. And I just think you need a little bit of creativity to make this happen in your mind. Cedric Mullins, 30 years old, center fielder, good defender, having a good offensive year. I'm going to pull up Cedric Mullins real quick. Cedric Mullins, 122 WRC plus, has been like roughly a league average hitter for the last 6 years. His whole career, he's kind of floated around there. He was a 6-WAR player in 2021 when he had a 136 WRC plus, 30 home runs. And he's been a 3.7 to, he was 3.7 the next year and then a 2-WAR player the last 2 years on average. And a guy who, to me, just slots in right away. You go, that guy's just going to be a great left fielder in Seattle. 30 years old, free agent after this season, making $8 3/4 million this year. But a guy who maybe you go, could you extend? Would you be interested in extending Cedric Mullins? Especially because I think next year is your last year with Randy Arozarena. Is this a guy that could come in and be, the fill the Randy Arozarena hole? Also would certainly move Arozarena to the DH spot, which is, I think, that's a huge victory. Even if it is only some of the time right now, if there's a rotation in the outfield and Arozarena's, if you take Arozarena out of the outfield half of the games that he plays, that's an enormous victory. Bad fielder. Have we said this enough? A bad fielder. Mullins has been, I'm gonna pull it up real quick. In his career as a center fielder, he's been essentially league average. 3 runs below average per 150 games, within the margin of error of average, and has played center field that whole time. He probably gets a little bit of a bump if he moves to left field. A guy that could fill in center. He's left-handed. To me, makes a ton of sense. And then the other guy is they have a first baseman /DH /outfielder named Ryan O'Hearn, 31 years old, also a free agent after this season, makes $8 million a year. Probably not a real outfielder. Probably not a guy you want to depend on for outfield outs, but Ryan O'Hearn is... Hold on. Ryan O'Hearn, 175 WRC plus this year, but 119 and 118 the last 2 years and two, fullish seasons in Baltimore. Yeah, these aren't sexy options, by the way, but these are the guys that so Ryan O'Hearn hits for some power, 15.7% strikeout rate, 11.7% walk rate. These are both very good numbers, especially for a guy who hits for any power at all. This isn't a guy doing it with smoke and mirrors. This is a guy hitting the ball hard and not striking out, and a guy that could play first base. Theoretically, I guess I'm going to see how much outfield he's played in the last. I don't think he's played a ton of. He's played 11 games of right field this year, 2 games of left field this year, but 100 games total of outfield in his career. That's actually not. That's not nothing. He's been a below average outfielder, I think, as you would expect from a guy who's got a first base profile. But these are guys that, again, not sexy, but guys that I think you're not going to have to fight Baltimore. You're not going to have to convince them to move on from these guys as hard as you would players who are under contract or team control for significantly longer. In fact, I would say none of these guys that I've brought up, outside of Alex Bregman, and I'm still not even confident that I would do it for Alex Bregman because of the way his contract is structured and how he could opt out, and almost certainly would opt out if he got traded to Seattle. None of those guys do I think you would have to or should you trade Harry Ford for. You could be trading from the middle of the prospect list for any of these guys, I think. And maybe that might not be the only... Cedric Mullins is the only guy that I would say would I have any reservations, because I do think he's significantly better than the league realizes. But in either case, you're replacing Rowdy Tellez and moving when Luke Raley's healthy. That's an easy move of Arozarena to the DH spot. You need depth at these positions. If the start of this year has been any indication of anything, it's that you need depth at these positions, because these guys get hurt and they underperform. You got to have the ability to move on from or bench a guy for some amount of time. All right, quickly, I got to go pick up my kids. So I'm pre-recording this, obviously. So it's going to be, this obviously is not coming out. I'm going to talk about two topics? Do I have only 2 topics left? I think I only have 2 topics left. The first topic is the Mariners are going to retire Ichiro's number on August 9th. And then next year they're gonna also retire number 51 under Randy Johnson's name. And I've seen people upset about this. I think this is the most elegant solution to a very obvious problem that I identified in 2001 when the Mariners signed Ichiro and let him wear 51. That he was wearing a number that should have been retired by the Mariners under Randy Johnson at that time, my opinion. Not saying they should have retired it by the time they signed Ichiro, but Randy Johnson had played well enough as a Mariner that his number should have been retired as a Mariner. And now you're going to give that number to a guy, and great news is that guy became a Hall of Famer wearing the same number. It was a predictable, uncomfortable situation. I don't think Randy Johnson has enough sway with this organization to it's got to be an honor, but I don't think it was a foregone conclusion the way that the relationship between him and the organization ended, that he would ever come back and be honored by the Mariners or want to be. So to me, this is all good news, but I'd be curious in the comments what you think about that specific situation. Because to me, it sounds like the only elegant solution to a problem that was really not created in 2025. It was created in 2001. And then the last thing is the Oklahoma City Thunder are going to the finals. And I want a heat check from folks because I think I'm over it. Is that not over the Sonics leaving, not over the Sonics not returning. And I'm certainly rooting for the Indiana Pacers to beat Oklahoma City. But I remember when the Thunder were in the finals many years ago. Was it 2011? No, it had to be later than that. When were they last in the finals? Because, hold on. Thunder finals appearances. 2012 was the last year. I had just moved to Tacoma. I had become friends with Chris Brannon, also better known as Sonic Sky. And I remember while the Thunder were threatening to win a championship, I was on the phone with him a lot, really having like emotional conversations about what this meant and how difficult it would be as a Sonics fan for the Thunder to win a championship, only a couple years after moving to Oklahoma City. And I'll tell you a couple different things. There's no former Sonics on the roster anymore. The last guy, I believe, was Nick Collison. Russell Westbrook was drafted by the Sonics, but obviously never played for the Sonics. They moved to Oklahoma City after he got drafted, but very poetically, he at least held up a Sonics jersey at the draft, which is nice. I'm still rooting for. I just don't have. Maybe it's just I have 2 kids. I have a lot of other shit that I care about in the world, and it's been so long. But I just don't care that much anymore. In fact, the dude Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is the kind of player that I like, and he didn't do anything. He never played in Seattle. He hasn't spoken out against Seattle. I'm sure that, and by the way, a ton of NBA players want there to be basketball back in Seattle, and I think I guess maybe the other thing is it feels like basketball is back to being imminent in Seattle. But I want to know how you feel, because I feel very at peace with if the Thunder go and win a championship. I'm not going to be happy about it. I am rooting for the Pacers, but it's not going to wreck me like it would have 10 years ago. It's not going to wreck me, especially like it would have been 13 years ago or whatever, when it was still so fresh. And it was it felt like there was all the Chris Hansen and the Soto site seemed so viable, and it would just seem so fucking real. And now it's it's going to happen eventually, and we'll just care about it then. And I'm just not. Also, the guy, Aubrey McClendon, the guy that was the big financial backer, he died, and he was like a fraudster, and it's been a tough stretch. I mean, it's been despite I think having maybe the best GM in basketball. I think Sam Presti, I loved what he was doing in Seattle. I wish he could have done it for a team that was going to stay in Seattle, because I thought he was building a young, talented core that could win for years. And they did, and they never won a championship, but I was right. And I don't think you can do the same kind of drastic things that he did on a team that is not that is worried about alienating its fan base for a year, because he did. And the NBA has changed a ton since then. And it's a really strange dynamic. The NBA has a very strange dynamic, and it seems like it's the fans are less loyal to the city and more loyal to the players than any other sport, and whatever that is. And it's more about branding than championships. It'll never be that way for me, but whatever, that's the way it is, I guess. I can't fight it. But yeah, I'm I wasn't sure if I was how I would feel, and we're here now. The games haven't started yet, so maybe my mind will change, and I will watch some of it. I haven't watched much of the playoffs, but I will watch some of it. But let me know how you feel below, please. Genuinely, I want to know, because I'm at peace right now. As I sit, I say this as a person who is not watching the Thunder win a championship yet. I'm at peace right now. And I think it's probably better for my mental health to stay at peace. And it's probably better for my long-term Sonics fandom to stay at peace and to not be incredibly angry until they get here. And then it's going to be a long time before they are as good as the Thunder, very likely. So, but yeah, let me know below. By the way, thank you for listening. I have another podcast called Unseasoned with my buddy Jess Everett. Check out that if you wouldn't mind. Follow me on Instagram, on whatever, everything else except for Twitter. I'm Casey McLean Comedy. On Twitter, I'm the Casey McLean. Come out to shows. Please, I want to see you. Tell me you listen to this podcast if you come out. Thank you for listening, and I will talk to you.